A very good evening. You're watching News 9 Facebook Live with me, Adarsh Vepachedu. Now, as we all know, schools can begin reopening starting the 15th of October. In this very regard, the Education Ministry has gone ahead and has released a set of guidelines that schools and educational institutions must adhere to. Knowing these guidelines is important not just for the students but for the parents as well, as they will be able to understand and know if their ward's school is violating the guidelines laid out. While there are about 40 odd guidelines in this brief interaction, I'll be telling you some of the most important ones. Let's start with one of the first guidelines that I found very important. Students may attend schools only with the written consent of parents. So only if the parents have permitted their ward to go ahead and attend school, only if there is a written letter of sorts undersigned by the parents, will the student be allowed to enter the school. So that's one of the most important guidelines laid out. There will be flexibility in attendance norms, so there won't be any strict attendance criteria if somebody is not able to make it to school for whatever reason, be it due to fear or otherwise. There will be no sort of grave punishment or action that will be taken because there will be flexibility when it comes to the attendance norms. Now, students may opt for online classes rather than physically attend school. This has been the bigger idea ever since the pandemic began as to how things will eventually turn online, especially when it comes to schooling. So that is being stressed upon even in the guidelines that have been released for the reopening of schools. Individual students can really go ahead, and if they feel that they do not want to go to the school, they can continue, they can opt for online classes instead of attending school physically. Another point, students and teachers who live in the containment zones will not be allowed to attend schools starting next week. So when will they be allowed to attend school is still a question mark at this point in time, but it will not happen starting the 15th of October. Next up, precautions will be taken for preparing and serving midday meal in schools. Now, this is again something that happens across the state and the country, and this also is a place or an event where you could have the possibility of infection of coronavirus. So the ministry right there clearly indicating that schools and administration must take all necessary precautionary measures to ensure that the midday meal process is safe. Next up, the alternative academic calendar of the NCERT will be followed or may be followed is what the Education Ministry has said. And another important point is that there will be no assessment of any kind till up to 2 to 3 weeks of school reopening. There will also be use of ICT, and online learning shall be continue to be encouraged. Now, the standard operating procedure also provides for guidelines on ensuring emotional well-being of students and teachers with a reference drawn to Manodarpan initiative. Another important point, checklist for a safe school environment as adopted by UNICEF India guidelines has also been provided for schools, parents and students to really contain the spread of COVID-19. So it's very important that parents, students and teachers go through these very guidelines that have been laid out and that is in tune with what UNICEF India has said. Now, the ministry has also said that the needs of the most vulnerable students, including homeless and migrant children and those who may be directly affected by COVID-19, will be given the top priority. Now, as per the guidelines, schooling will alternate between home-based and the formal system, and the modes of learning will be through face-to-face instruction itself. So that is again another one that's given. So from the 15th of October, we'll see a bit of both, a bit of online classes and also a bit of the formal way of teaching, which is you have the students sitting in classes on their benches. Now, individual assignments and group-based projects will also have the same face-to-face instruction at this point in time. In the guidelines, the ministry has also said that alternative academic calendars should be framed for the entire year, and that these calendars may be realigned for the whole year in accordance with the emerging situation. The ministry has also said that reintegration of students will take priority once schools reopen. Now, these are a few important guidelines that have been laid out, but these are not all the guidelines. So I will be posting the full list of guidelines either in the description or comment section down below. But for now, let us cut across to Shashi Kumar, who is the General Secretary for the primary and secondary education, secondary medium schools, unaided schools to be more precise, joining us on the phone line. Many thanks, sir, for speaking to us. What do you have to say about the guidelines released by the Education Ministry? Is everything on expected lines, or do you see something that is missing?
Absolutely no doubt, because this was a repetitive, and it has already been last time they have released the same kind, and now once again due to this October 15th they have released again, and more or less things remain same. We are not so clear about some certain things. That is, number one, what do you mean by SOP? SOP has been given whether it is applicable for both private and public school, and all the equipments, for example, thermometer or a oximeter or a sanitization required equipment, are they been specified in this? No, they have not been mentioned anything. Just at the cosmetic level, they have mentioned SOP with disinfectant and so on. Our question is, again, we are starting on October 15th, but when it comes to Karnataka, whether the appropriate government will take decision on this standard operating procedure, that means the guidelines issued by the central, because it is covering the entire country. Wherever it is feasible, those states can commence with this standard thing, and within their own structure, they will be preparing their own SOPs. But the SOP should be still specific. What you have to, how should be the schools accountable? Our main concern is, like, we have a lot of confusion in when a child or a teacher or anybody in the system is identified or suspected to be COVID-19, then what is the things we are supposed to do? That is not been clear. If any child is being positive, what exactly the planning should be, how it should be operated, because this should come across the country same. It is not like in Karnataka one thing, in Goa one thing, in Maharashtra one thing. These standard procedures should be across the country same. So it would have been more clear if the central government have given some clarity on these aspects. And moreover, when we are talking about in the first phase, 9th to 12th, we also demand and have some clarity that Government of India has to give some special provisions to the principals or the headmisters or the headmasters, so that they could handle the situation. Because
Mr. Shashi Kumar, that apologies to interrupt you, but that may happen eventually. We're still it's the 5th of October. We still have about 10 days for the schools to reopen.
Now and then, see, in the last minute, you need not give anything because it gets still confused. That is what happens usually. We need it very clarity, whether it is opening on October 15th or November, whatever so. The standard procedure for schools and colleges has to be very specific, because the accountability part of parent is missing in this. Completely no say on parents. What is their role, their responsibility, their accountability? If they are not cooperative, it is not possible only to the institution or the appropriate local government to take.
Mr. Shashi Kumar, the only mention that I find of parents in the guidelines is the point where it says that there needs to be a written consent for a student to go ahead.
Written consent is not a big deal. It is not a big deal. Written consent is, apart from that, if a parent, though they know that their child is being infected or he has a fever, he has some other ailment, they don't bother, and they just send, because they have given the consent. If administering paracetamol and sending to the school and getting others infected, all these things, the responsibility lies very much with the parents. They have to cooperate. They have to cooperate in all aspects, because children are vulnerable and they are not even like we have a unconditional right with the children. So they don't hear us. They don't hear the society. They don't hear the parents. They don't hear the schools. So we need certain positive reinforcement so that some authority has to take care and see that they are being disciplined in this aspect also.
Well, Mr.
Otherwise,
Shashikumar,
it is very
that
difficult.
hasn't happened so far. So you're a general secretary. How confidence inspiring is it? And what would be your larger message to the parents, to the parents and lakhs of students who must be watching you right now? Please tell them as to how ready are the schools in Karnataka, and what would be your larger message to them?
No, if at all we open, definitely private unaided schools will be the best to provide maximum capacity of safety and security with whatever the SOPs are. But I am afraid whether this is followed by the public schools, because parents are also equally in number in public schools.
Correct.
We are really worried about them, and from them again it may be a problem with the private school children also, because now when we talk about Karnataka, there is one project by name Vidyagama. It has been running in government schools. Now already teachers have been infected with COVID, children have been infected, there are many reports, and it has been rising day by day. So when we talk about this, really even we are worried, how can we manage this situation? So everybody is responsible, even the society, education department, health department, as well as the parents community, including the school authorities. They should have a best out of best responsibility so that they can safeguard themselves first as well as the students and keep continued learning process. Or else it will be a big problem to the
Mr.
long,
Shashikumar,
retention
yes
of
indeed.
learning.
Mr. Shashikumar, we were just mentioning, we were just speaking about how there seems to be quite a few ifs and buts in the guidelines that have been released just now. What do you have to say about the overall preparedness of Karnataka schools? And also, if I were to ask you, looking at the guidelines that have been released, would you say that October 15th is a little too early? And my follow-up question is, how many schools do you think will open up, let's just say, in a state like Karnataka?
For your more clarity on your question, I would rather say already the schools have been running illegally in Karnataka, including public school. There are lakhs of children are already in the schools, but not officially. Number two, we are prepared. Private and aided schools are prepared, but the situation is not so favoring for 15th. That a government has to take a call. Today, Education Minister had called a meeting, but he unfortunately cancelled it. I don't know why. And the preparedness of our education department and government is really a sad situation, because they themselves have no clarity. They themselves are not prepared within their schools. They have around 70,000 schools and 40,000 schools of public. They're not at all prepared, even 5%. So naturally, because of that, they are trying to block the private unaided schools who can also in other way can open and support this system. But we are again worried why government is not so active. Anyhow, we have a new commissioner for us, so we have some hopes on him. He will take a call shortly, and because he is just 3 days he is in the seat, and within a week we expect something to happen with this angle too.
Right. Mr. Shashikumar, let's just say delaying the reopening of schools in Karnataka beyond the 15th of October, don't you think it will be, in a sense, detrimental for the lives of students, in a sense, their careers? Yes, it is all about striking a balance between life of a student and the career of a student. But how do we strike this all-important balance? And don't you think there's already been quite a bit of delay?
Absolutely, no doubt, because learning is a lifelong process from starting with 3 months in the womb, and it keeps neurogenesis is a lifelong process. And if you don't use your brain for a certain period, you are going to pruning it. I mean, the things, whatever you have learned is getting dissolved, and it will not be a qualitative learning outcome and a longer gap. And definitely we are worried about it, so that private unaided schools are providing online, offline. The most difficult thing has been made possible by the most of the schools across, so that they are reaching their children. But yes, I do agree the quality will not be the same as one-to-one or physical classroom. But still, continued learning. But the responsibility here also, I would say, the parents are most important responsible to at least give and see that their children follow the instruction. They keep with the situation with the support of teachers and the faculties, because faculties try, work hard. You believe it or not, this country, this state, especially teachers, I salute them. They were unable, they didn't know this type of situation may come, but today they are well prepared. They are working rather than the physical class. Believe it or not, from morning till late night, teachers are sitting in the small screens. They are trying to do something best out of best, keeping children engaged. But this has to be regarded by the parents community as well as the education department, because it is a social responsibility. Without any support for this teachers community, this country has given nothing to them, but still they are kindly, they are supporting this system. Hands up to them.
Well, sir, indeed, Mr. Shashikumar, and that's the kind of human service that our teachers have been giving out ever since the pandemic began. Many thanks, Mr. Shashi, for joining us and for shedding light on what the guidelines have really been all about. And yes, there are a few questions, a few red flags, a few ifs and buts, if I were to say that, in the guidelines that have been released. A few of the questions that Shashikumar had, you just heard them, and the guidelines do not really have answers to that. Yes, it is left to the governments of individual states as to what they want to do going forward. It remains to be seen as to what Karnataka government will decide in the days to come, whether they will go ahead and look for the reopening of schools from the 15th of October, or whether we will see another delay when it comes to the reopening of schools. But yes, even if schools were to open on the 15th of October, the most important thing that we must do is carry out all of those necessary precautions, make sure that we are ensuring hand hygiene and social distancing at all possible times. And yes, parents, they have a great responsibility at hand, big responsibility. Ensure that you are taking the right kind of a decision in consultation with doctors, with your own ward, and do what's best for your ward. And yes, there's no hard and fast rule that your child has to go to the school. The child can continue studying from home through the online medium. So that's what the guidelines are all about, and we shall keep you posted about how Karnataka and rest of the states respond to these guidelines, and whether we will see the reopening of schools from the 15th of October and how many of them. If you've liked the information that we've shared with you this evening, do not forget to like, share and subscribe to News 9 on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. Many thanks for joining us.